about some stuff. I hope this goes forward. It does not. This one goes forward. There we go. My direction was bad. So again, stand up if you know who this person is. It's Ashton Kutcher. Stand up if you know who this is. But you're going to have to stand up one of those days. Good. Okay, do you know not just his face, but you know why he's important, why we know him. He's from Iowa. It's a pretty cool guy. Now stay standing if you know who this is. This is Norman Borlaug. Do you know who Norman Borlaug is? Stay standing. You know who Norman Borlaug is. Everyone right now knows who Norman Borlaug is. Sit down if you do not know who Norman Borlaug is. The rest of you do. Awesome. All right, cool. Stay standing if you know who this is. This is Claire Patterson. Stay standing. Otherwise, sit down. None of you know who Claire Patterson is? This is Claire Patterson. Okay, that's exactly why I'm here today. So, yes, I'm selling my art, and that's cool, and maybe you don't care about that, and that's very okay as well. But at the same time, I think this is important. And this guy's name is Claire Patterson. I think he's one of the most important people to ever come out of the state of Iowa. And the fact that you're all sitting down right now upsets me a little bit. And the reason is because that's just kind of his thing. Even when, I'm going to talk a bit about him, and he's a scientist, even when he wrote a very important piece of science and put it out there in the world, he didn't put his own name first, he put one of his students' names, because that's the kind of guy he was. But because of that kind of attitude, we don't know that this is one of the most important people to ever come out of our state. Even, I think, more important than Norman Borlaug, although Norman Borlaug is pretty awesome too, as you probably know. So anyway, Claire Patterson, just a little bit about him. Claire Patterson was born in Iowa, Mitchellville, Iowa, and he went to college and he was studying chemistry and geology, and he was charged by his professor to date this specimen, to know how old it was. Now at this time in history, this was in the 60s, I think, 60s or 70s, we were really bad at knowing how old the Earth was, and our ideas on it were wrong. We were just wrong. And so Claire's assignment, basically, from this professor was, with our new technology, with all we know now, date this specimen. And so he started doing it, and he couldn't do it. And so he developed what we now know as a clean room, and it took him years to figure this out. He was like, it's contaminated. So he developed this clean room, and there's very few pictures of him, but one of them you can find on Google is him with his shirt off, and he's like scrubbing this plastic floor in a lab, and you can see him kind of coming up with this concept of this clean room. And he does it after years, and he takes this specimen in there, and it's still contaminated. And so he realizes something else is going on here. And through this, he invents more things that are more amazing, like ice core samples. He's the one who came up with that idea. He's like, well, something in the atmosphere is contaminating our specimens before we can even get them in the clean room. So it must be in our atmosphere. But ice core samples wouldn't have that, glaciers, right? So he's going on doing that kind of thing, doing amazing things. He ends up dating the Earth, measuring the date of the Earth correctly. First person ever to do that from Iowa. Pretty cool. But in the process, he realizes this thing that's contaminating his specimens is also poisoning us as humans. And it's a pretty big deal. And it's a toxic chemical that's in the air, and it's put out intentionally, knowingly, by a corporation who was selling our gasoline to us. It was lead in our gasoline that was contaminating our air, and there was so much lead in the air, a substance called TEL made gasoline much cheaper to make, but it also contaminated us with lead. And our body has no way of getting rid of lead, and our atmosphere has no way of getting rid of lead, and so this was a major problem. And through his ice core samples, he proved that when it was introduced, TEL was introduced in our gasoline, that's when our levels started going up. It was not just correlation, it was causation. And so he fought it, and he was discredited, he was defunded, because guess who was funding his research? The oil companies. And they defunded him, they discredited him, they took him out of the geological societies that he was in, that he was the most knowledgeable person, and he was taken out. And for decades, he fought this fight to take lead out of our gasoline. And he finally, in like the 90s, early 90s, fully won that battle. It took forever. And this is the kind of person that we need to know about. I feel like this is, I have some other slides I kind of skipped through, but this was on season 1, Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos did an episode on him. Did you see that episode? I saw you shaking your head. I was like, I bet this is why. That, or Bill Bryson wrote a book called The Short History of Almost Everything, and he mentions him in there as well as an important person. But this was like the reenactment of the court hearings where this is like the most well-known guy from the oil company discrediting him over and over again. And so again, after he won, we didn't know who he was. And I think that's why I do my art the way I do it. I paint a lot of people from Iowa. I paint a lot of people I think are important that maybe you don't know. and I like to tell the story. And so, though I'm up here trying to, in some way sell my art, at the same time, I'm taking this opportunity with my art to tell you the story about why this person is important. And I think even this week, in the past week or two, it's a good time to remember there are people that stand up for things that are right. And we're kind of in this place right now where we're looking at the people that aren't doing that, or that are standing up for things that are wrong. And it's good to remember people like this that stand up for the right stuff, even when it's hard. And so, the next time you fill up your tank of gas, say a thank you because you're using unleaded fuel. Say a thank you to Claire Patterson. That's it. Thank you.